Oh, no, we are
Oh,
live.
we're live.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on our first of many daily live conversations to answer the many questions that are racing through your mind right now. You guys have been thrown into the spotlight. Your team, your patients, your community, they're all watching on how you respond to this. And the decisions that you're forced to make right now are some of the hardest decisions you've ever had to make, and probably have never had to make anything like this before, or were never prepared for this. So the live conversation mini series was designed to help you navigate through these difficult times. So today we have two of our brilliant HR strategists, Olivia and Isabel. Our team of HR professionals have a combined experience of 25 years in HR, working with both nonprofit, for-profits, and major companies like Amazon and Black & Decker. They are chartered HR professionals, they have senior SHRM certified members, and they even have fancy PhDs in organizational psychology. So they're here today to talk about the updates on the COVID-19. So really kind of understanding what's new, because things are changing literally hour by hour, day by day, and how is this impacting your business right now? But before we begin, I want to remind everyone that in light of how quickly things are changing, there's new things that are being released. So all the information might be different tomorrow. So we're doing our best to make sure that we're keeping up with everything, making sure that you have all the information that you need. But also just a reminder that this is not legal advice. So please contact your employment lawyer, reach out to your regulatory boards on how to handle some things on employment law, and also what to do if you decide to close your office. So each province, each state, each territory, all of their guidelines are very different slightly. So make sure to check with your local labor law or your local labor boards. So in that way you have the right information. So let's dive in. So the first thing that we want to talk about is what's new with the Family First Response Corona Act, right? Coronavirus Act, Isabel. That's a mouthful. So what's new with that?
Okay, so let me just go back and kind of briefly again explain what the bill is about. So like Samantha said, it's the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and it'll be effective April 2nd. So this applies to anyone who has 500 or less employees. And so if they've worked for your practice for 30 days or more, you're going to be eligible for this new sick medical leave and for FMLA. So this bill requires employers to do two things. They provide 2 weeks, which is 80 hours of paid sick leave, paid at the employee's regular rate of pay. So either self-quarantine or seek diagnosis or preventative care to coronavirus. Proof of self-quarantine or seeking diagnosis must be given in order for them to do so. Or the second part of this is they will be paid at 2/3 of the regular rate of pay to take care of a family member or to take care of a child due to school or daycare closures because of the coronavirus. Now, I also want to mention that this does not come into effect, like I said, until April 2nd. So it's very important for you to kind of decide what you want to do before then with your employees, if you want to close, if you want to remain open only for emergency procedures. That way, whenever April 2nd comes, you're not having to be faced with the fact that you are going to have to pay your employees these rates for those 2 weeks. Now, the American Dental Association has been pushing for dental practices and small businesses to have be exempt from this bill, but there hasn't been any information up to date as of today to provide how to apply for the exemption, what are the requirements, what documents do you need. So even though that is talked about, it's not a guaranteed. So I highly recommend that you prepare for the worst possible outcome. So like Samantha said, we're not lawyers. We're just reading this and learning as we go. So make sure that you go through everything, understand what we're talking about. If you have questions, reach out, and that way we can help you guide you on what you want to do before April 2nd. So if you are still open and you do have employees, you are going to be mandated to follow this bill.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Isabel. Like, time is ticking, and I mean, a lot has happened in the last 7 days alone. So we want to make sure that we're being proactive. We're not being reactive here, because what ends up happening is that we're going to make some decisions based off of our emotions and fear. And sometimes that could not only impact the situation that we're in right now, but long term, right? Like our culture, our reputation, how patients, our interactions and the relationships that we've developed over these years. So we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence right now. So that's why we're here. We also wanted to not only give you the updates on what's happening, but also give you some options. So let's dive into what are some options that these practices can start looking into for the time being, to be able to decide, hey, if April 2nd, if this passes and we are not exempt from this, then what are our options here? So Olivia, why don't you start off with maybe what can practices do in Canada? What options are available for them right now?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Samantha. So basically right now, one of the biggest things that we're looking at for Canadian business is work sharing programs. So these work sharing programs are designed to help our eligible employees avoid layoffs when there is a temporary reduction in the normal level of business activity. And this is specifically anything that would affect the normal level of business activity that is beyond the control of the employer. Okay, so obviously pandemic, not in the control of any employer. So this program is available to both federally and provincially regulated employers, but it is important to make sure that you are eligible for these type of programs. So employers that may not enter a work sharing program would be any employers that have seasonal employees or students hired for the summer, anyone that's working with a co-op, if employees are hired on casual or on-call basis, or any employees that are also shareholders of the business. So in these work sharing programs, we're going to be taking multiple employees and having them work in one role. So basically, we're trying to keep as many people employed as possible, but having reduced hours for everyone involved. And as a result of this, employment insurance benefits through the emergency care and emergency support benefits will now be provided for eligible employees as income support. And in these programs, affected employees must agree to work a reduced schedule and share available work over a specified period of time. And this must be agreed to in writing. That is something that is super, super important. And of course, check with your employment lawyers, get them to draft up a contract for you if you are going to be entering a work sharing program, because it's really important that everyone that's going into this agreement understands what the terms of the agreement are. Now, also with our work sharing program, the mandatory waiting period has been waived based on the pandemic here. So that's something also to consider, is that you can get these started right away. So in terms of eligibility for these kinds of programs, we want to make sure that you have been in business in Canada for at least 2 years on a year-round basis, so a continual basis. You may be a private business, a publicly held company, or a nonprofit. All of those are eligible. You would also have to demonstrate that the shortage of work is temporary and beyond your personal control as an employer. You would also have to demonstrate a recent decrease in business activity of approximately 10%, which I'm sure a lot of you are dealing with much bigger decreases in activity than the 10% minimum requirement. And then finally, you'll need to submit and implement a recovery plan that's designed to build a return to work program for your employees once this period of time is over. So now when we're talking about periods of time, work shared programs can last for a variety of durations. They must be a minimum of 6 weeks, and this would be from the time of the agreement. And generally, based on Canadian legislation, the normal maximum was 38 weeks, but now based on COVID-19, this has been changed to up to 76 weeks. Okay, so you can do this for a long period of time to try to support your team as much as possible as we go through all of this together. So in any given week, the work reduction can vary depending on the available work for each employee, as long as the work reduction is on average between 10 and 60% throughout the entire duration of the program. So during this program, none of your employees can be working at that full capacity that they normally were. And we want to make sure that they're still between the 10 and 60% reduction, so they're not going anywhere below 40% of their normal hours. So now, go ahead.
That is a great resource for practices.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you, these are things that can really, like the benefit of this?
Yeah, the benefit is huge because it keeps more people employed with some form of at least a stable or predictable income, right? So it's not their full income, but at least they know that it's coming, and at least they know that they can have access to at least 40% of their usual income. And this is huge for employers as well, because cost cutting is becoming so important right now, simply because there's less work to be done, there's less demand.
Right. Right. And so what's the process for them to continue, like to actually look into this or maybe apply for this?
Yeah, so the application for Canadian employers, there's two different ways you can go. So you can either apply through the Government of Canada website, through the Employment and Social Development branch. Otherwise, both employers and employees can apply to get these programs started. There's two different toll-free numbers that you can call, and those resources are also on the Government of Canada website.
Awesome. No, I think that's a great option for practices. And now, Isabella, is there something similar to the US that they could have this option available for them as well?
Yes, Samantha. So right now, currently, we have over 27 states who do have this work sharing programs, not all of them, unfortunately. So essentially what it is, so we have work sharing or short-term compensation, which is also known, like I mentioned, as work share, is an alternative to layoffs for employers experiencing a reduction in available work. So short-term compensation preserves employees, jobs, and employers' trained workforce during the time of lowered economic activity, especially like right now, COVID-19. This is definitely affecting a lot of people who have small businesses or anyone really. So to be eligible for this program, one, really depends on your state. So like I mentioned, 27 states do have this. We do have the resources and the link to give you if you're interested in knowing which states do have work sharing programs. So in order to receive these benefits, employers, not employees actually, so employers must have an approved short-term compensation plan in place with the appropriate state workforce agency. So like I said, each state is different. The application process is initiated by the employer and not the employee. Therefore, in order for employees with reduced hours to potentially be eligible for the short-term compensation, the employer must submit an application to the appropriate state agency, and the state must be approved the employer's application plan before anything happens. So they have to, not only do the employers have to submit it, but they have to wait for the response to see if they're eligible to do so. In order to qualify for the short-term compensation, employees must first be determined to be eligible for the unemployment benefit while receiving unemployment benefits under the short-term compensation plan. Employees are not required to meet availability or work or search requirements, since that has been waived. Normally, when you apply for unemployment, you have to be showing them that you're, constantly looking for work, but that has been waived. But they are required to be available for their normal work week in case something happens. So this not only goes with, reduced hours, but you can also be eligible for partial employment. So in case something happens, like say your dental practice does this and you need someone to come in for an emergency procedure, and they are available to do that. But like I said, definitely check your state, because if your state does not have it, then you might not be eligible for this and you might just have to go full unemployment. But it really is dependent on your state, like I said. So this benefits businesses because they retain valued employees and avoid recruiting costs and training costs when the economic conditions return to normal. So this can kind of go as both ways, not only for the employee or the employer. They can still maintain their job security in a sense. And then once this, subsides, then people, they can return to work like they would normally. In short, the short work programs are especially designed to help businesses and workers in their communities to get through the temporary economic disruptions like those caused by coronavirus.
Definitely. And I think, that's, again, another great opportunity and option. But I feel that the common thread here is that these practices need to decide what their options are, especially if you need to submit this to your state to get that approval for work sharing programs. This is something that we can't keep waiting, closer to April 2nd. That's coming up pretty quickly. So we want to make sure that we do our due diligence right now to be able to support our team and also have that flexibility that if we want them to continue working on the practice, because we're not in the practice, then this is a great option to do that. So I guess along with those lines, that would kind of look more like remote working. So if we have our team working remotely, what do we need to have in place? So in that way, we've got everything organized, and all the I's dotted and T's crossed during this. Olivia, do you want to?
Absolutely.
Okay. Not paper scissors, girls.
I know, we're like, who's going?
All good. So basically with the remote working, we want to make sure that the first thing you do before you implement any remote working practices is that you do have the policies in place. So once again, we've said it before, we'll keep saying it again, contact your employment lawyer to get these policies together so that you know that you're, like Samantha just said, your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted through this kind of unprecedented time that we've never really lived through before. So with the remote working, employees can work away from the traditional office. Again, we want to make sure that those agreements are in place so that they are maintaining confidentiality. They are maintaining, if you're a dental office, that they are maintaining those best practices of keeping patient information safe. Okay, that is vital throughout any sort of remote work. Remote working can help for a number of ways because it provides you with the necessary tools in order to continue to do your business, even in these unforeseen circumstances. So you're able to keep that business continuity amidst the mandate to stay socially distant from one another. And as we're all here online virtually, like we are still working right now, but we are not sitting side by side. Okay, so based on the technology that we do have available, remote working is becoming easier to actually conduct. So it's not as much of a scary territory as it used to be.
And one thing I actually wanted to add too, not obviously dental practice, not everyone in the office is going to be eligible to do this, only certain people. So that's one of the things too that you want to look into, figure out who is going to be able to work from home. So someone like the office manager who's still, she can work or he can work from home, and make sure that the policies and procedures is set in place. So like Olivia mentioned, if you don't have those, contact us. We can help you provide the necessary information in order to have this set up. We do have policies in place for that. And one thing too, even if once this subsides, I highly recommend that if you did implement remote from work, you still leave it in your handbook or in your company policies, just in case something, God forbid something happens, but it's better to be prepared than to not be. And while you do have this implemented during the time that, hopefully whenever we come back and you guys open, test it out, do a trial run, and have that person who remote worked work a few days of the week at home, so they're used to and able to kind of see how it would be if they actually were to do this on a more consistent basis. Like she also mentioned, Olivia, she mentions information and how to keep it confidential. Get a VPN, especially for people who are working at home. It is very important to have that security. If you are working at home, it's not just going to be you and the internet. It's very crucial for patient information to be kept confidential. And by having a VPN in your computer, it'll save you a lot of hassles later on. So those are a few things that we can kind of throw at you and give you some information on regarding remote work. I mean, we can go into detail, but essentially these are the main points that I think would benefit each dental practice.
Definitely. And like you said, most practices probably never had to have a team member work remotely before. So most of the time, these policies, procedures aren't in place. But one of the things that you both had mentioned was making sure that those policies are there and it's written. We have them signed off on it so that there's no, misunderstandings. Interpretations of that. So making sure that policy is in place, and then some great resources like Isabel mentioned, making sure that we use a VPN. A lot of people are concerned, well, what if this person clocks in and for the 5-6 hours are just scrolling Facebook? So how do we monitor that? And there's some great resources as well out there that we recommend to our clients, like Hive Desk. Is fantastic to be able to actually have an employee clock in and clock out, and then it randomly takes screenshots every 4 to 10
of what you're doing
to see, okay, like, hey, it looks like for 2 hours you were just on Facebook. So I'm going to be able to compensate you for that time, because just like you outlined in the policy, this is what we expected you to be performing during that, right? So I hope this was able to kind of give you guys some information. I don't see any questions posted on here, but if there's anything that you guys have, please feel free to reach out to us. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to kind of touch on as some options for some practices while we wait?
I just wanted to kind of go back and reiterate, make sure if you have doubts, if you have any questions regarding what to do with your practice, if you're going to stay open or closed about your employees, reach out to us because April 2nd, the deadline's coming up. And I just want to make sure that you guys are comfortable in the decision that you guys are doing. So if you don't know what to do, reach out to Samantha, reach out to Olivia or myself, and we'll be able to guide you in making that decision. I know a lot of the times it's very confusing, especially now that information's everywhere. But by giving you the right tools and providing you with the right information, it'll be an easier way for you to decide on what to do with your employees.
Absolutely. And just kind of piggybacking on everything that we've talked about today, this is unprecedented time. This is scary. And this is, it's hard to deal with. And it's important that we all remember that we're not in this alone. We are all dealing with this together. And even though we're staying socially distant, try to avoid that isolation. So, use your different communication methods to keep in touch with your employees, keep in touch with your team. It can be something as easy as just an informal phone call, just saying, hey, I was thinking about you today. How are you doing? How are you coping with all of this? Because that's going to be so important to your culture once everything does go back to normal or the new normal, and we do get our practices up and running again. That's going to be vital.
Yep, exactly. And being proactive is super important. And I know this is something that none of us ever, when we were writing our New Year's resolutions, on there, right?
2020, new decade.
Yeah. 2010 so far, not it.
Exactly. I give it a 1-star review so far. I don't like 2020, but nobody, like, all joking aside, nobody anticipated this, right? And this is something that we have never seen on a global scale impact so many industries, right? Not alone just dentistry. So I feel like it's really important that we, I don't want to say it, but for lack of a better word, we kind of take some lessons from what we've learned throughout this. So maybe if we didn't have any policies in place, maybe if there is no employment agreements for Canada in specific, no handbooks, no processes, like this is where we start to kind of see the results of not having this in place, right? So we want to make sure not only are we making the best decisions right now, but ultimately, if we rush into some of those decisions, make those decisions out of fear, sometimes those decisions will bite us later on in 3 to 6 months from now as we start to reopen. So that's why it's super important that we do our research, we reach out to professionals. I know there's a lot of information everywhere. It's it can be almost put us in paralysis by analysis, but we want to make sure that we check our state, we check our provincial, because there's so many things that I've already been seeing online that people are posting out there. But as we start doing more research for that particular client, we notice that is not possible in their state. So just make sure you do your research, do your due diligence. So in that way, you see, how we get through this right now is going to determine what our business is going to look like 6 months, a year from now. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, but but we are going to continue on with our series. So tomorrow we're going to have Ken on board. He is a certified behavioral analyst. So he's going to give us some tools and resources on how we can not only maintain our mental health, but also the mental health of our team members too, and how to lead during these difficult times, because being a leader, it ain't easy to begin with. So doing it during this time is even harder. So we want to be there to be able to provide some support, some resources. So make sure to tune in for that tomorrow. And again, like Isabel and Olivia mentioned, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to help. So I don't see any questions. So I'm hoping that we gave them some good resources and help them out. But thanks so much for joining, guys. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Olivia and Isabel. I know you guys have been super busy this week, dealing with all of our clients and building all the resources. Again, check our website. We've got some blogs. We've got some FAQ guides. We've recently done a webinar. So there's a lot of things that we're going to be providing as support for you guys. So we've got a couple comments here. So Sherry, of course, love Sherry. Thank you. And then we have Tatiana, who said great information. Thank you. Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys. Bye for now.